I hope everyone had a good 4th of July holiday. I usually program with music on in the background, so I'm going to try that out today. Please let me know if the audio sounds strange. That would be cool. But yeah, I hope everyone is staying cool outside. It's hot as just hell here. Thanks for your Midwestern summer. Sun and humidity are all that I get right now. So try not to go outside. It's probably for the best. So I started with a project a couple of days ago, and I want to pick up kind of where I left off with that. And so I've been working on this Xamarin project with Amazon Web Services, and basically walked through a sample of how to set up, we had this cute little app here, and how to set up where when we click this registration button, it would go through and call and make a put request to our Amazon Kinesis client, and then take that data and then walk through how to write a function for AWS Lambda that would then look for put requests on that stream and then process them. And so that's kind of the recap of my last stream. I don't have my management studio open for SQL Server, so let's do that. But what I want to pick up on today is accessing Lambda functions directly. Now, this was probably the hardest thing I had to try to figure out, because the documentation is not very clear on whether you should even be able to do this, which is weird. Let me get logged in. So what we often want to be able to do is pull data directly out of a table, out of an S3 bucket. We want to be able to read put requests that have been placed up in the Kinesis stream. So in the case of the example that we looked at the other day, the put requests we were making through Lambda were putting data into this registration table. So what if you wanted to pull that data back out? And you could either do this by making sure that the put requests that have been added to your Kinesis stream don't get removed. Because right now, when Lambda processes those packages from the put request, it's then taking them out of the stream and just throwing them away. So you could then say, well, I don't want you to throw them away. Just process them and leave them. And then you could always make a call to that stream and get that information out and read whatever you might have put up there. In our case, I wanted to just throw those packages away, and then train of thought today. Throw the packages away, put the data in the database, and then I wouldn't have to worry about it. So in this example, what I'm going to do today is read data back out of this database directly through a Lambda function, which means we're going to write another Lambda function today. Very similar, but instead of writing data to the database, we're going to query data out of the database when the function is called. Now, I will tell you right up front, one of the reasons why I think that this is not an advised method is that this is slow. And you'll be able to see, you know, when we did the test with the Lambda function and the Kinesis stream and everything, it was really fast. I mean, it happened, you made the put request, the function got called, it made the record in the database. It just happened really quickly. When you're reading from one of these Lambda functions, it will not be nearly as quick. So you kind of have to be prepared for that. All right, so I'm going to leave this alone. I'm going to just start another instance of Visual Studio because you know how much I seem to hate my computer. We'll see how many instances of Visual Studio I can have open at once. Because the first thing I'm going to do is write that Lambda function. So we're going to create a new project. So this is an AWS Lambda project. Here we go, .NET Core. So I'm just going to call this get registration. I don't already have one named this, do I? Like, we already learned our lesson from yesterday. No, I don't. All right. All right, and again, it's going to pop up with a template here. We are not reading from Kinesis this time, which means that you don't have to use that template in order to just call the database. If you were using a DynamoDB function or something, you could use that template, but I think in my case, I don't need it. So I'm just going to go with an empty function. That's why I have to listen with music on. I don't know that you can hear it. Let's turn it up a little bit. All right. Because then I'll be dancing to nothing that you can hear, and that would just be weird. I think it's this heat, man. I feel really like I'm coming down with something, but I'm not. Bizarre. All right, so here's what this looks like when you don't start with one of these templates. You just get the basics, right? A simple function that takes a string and does like a to upper on it and then returns it. All right, thanks, Amazon. That's an odd example. All right, so basically what I want to build is I want a function handler that can take in a string. We talked before about how these function handlers are not allowed to have more than 2 parameters. And you can see in this one, you almost always have to have the iLambda context. So in most cases, I would say you're only allowed 1 parameter, and this is the string. I want to take in, let's take in the user email. So I'm just going to change this to email so that we know what we're doing. And then, as you can see in this example, you can set these functions up for returns, and that's what we want. We want to set these up for returns. But what I want to return is more than one thing. I don't want to just return a string. I want to return the entire record. So I want to be able to return, like, this is the John Snow with the phone number and the email and everything that we put in here last stream. I want to be able to return the whole record, which means, similarly to last time, and I could probably just pull that function up that we wrote last time, and that would be helpful. You have to put the class in there. Let me go over here, and I will dig it out. Stuff we wrote on, what was that, Tuesday? And the worst part about having a break like this in the middle of the week is that it feels like this week officially had 2 Mondays. Like, today feels like Monday, and it's the worst. I hate it. All right. So you'll tell me if the music's too loud while I look for the Lambda function that we wrote on Tuesday. I think it's this one. Let me pull it up over here because I'm pretty sure that I still have the password in it. We don't want that. Do not want. Doc, over here. Over here. What are you doing? Visual Studio. Yeah, okay. There we go. Okay, so this was the Lambda function that I wrote last time that reads from Kinesis. So this one doesn't even need to do anything that fancy. But what I wanted to grab out of here was this class. Because where Kinesis needed to serialize that data, I just need to be able to return this object. And in fact, what if I have more than one of them? Because like in this case, I'm not checking that any of these email addresses are unique. So I want to actually be able to return a list of this type. So I'm actually going to change this function to return, and I'm going to need to add it's collections, oops, nope, system dot collections generic. That's where the .NET list class lives. There we go. So we're going to return a list of student objects. That would be ideal. Hey, someone's here. Bark, bark. Hold on a second. Too much noise in the background. Too much dog barking. People come home and there's dog barking. I don't like it. All right, so I can set up a list. Go ahead and initialize it. If you want to put those log lines and stuff that we had like last time so that you can see kind of what's going on, you can use this context logger log line. So we could do like, man, really does not want to work with me today. I restarted my computer and everything in hopes that IntelliSense would take mercy on me. Okay. So setting up our connection string like last time, I can just go grab it out of the exact same connection string that we used last time. Didn't add in my package yet, did I? Database packages. Gotta add the database packages. So last time I talked about how usually what you need to do is get the system.data.sql client package, because the .NET Core, which is what Lambda uses for C#, does not contain by default the system.data.sql client .NET class libraries. So we have to import them in with NuGet. This is some strange music. I just turned like a streaming station on. All right. All right, so we want, I'm going to screw up my line endings here. Could line wrap this, but I just want to make sure it looks okay. Okay, that looks right. I'll have to go through and put the password in before I deploy this, and I will try not to forget like I usually do. Okay, what else do I need to do? So this is my SQL connection string. And then inside of here, so basically creating this using statement, which means that everything inside of this block is going to use this connection string that object thing that I've created here. Setting up my SQL command. We're going to do basically the same thing, but this is a SQL command. And the command we want to use is a select. So we want to select star from, was it dbo.registration? Yep. Where our user email equals, and here's where things have to get tricky. So we're bringing in that email as a string. When Lambda passes it and parses it over to SQL, it's going to have to be in quotes. So we're going to have to encapsulate here. So single quote, double quote, concatenate in the email, concatenate in double quote, single quote, double quote. So you end up with little tick marks around it. And then this takes the connection string as a parameter, and that quote doesn't belong there. So I know that looks kind of funky because you have to be able to encapsulate this field in the quotes. If you don't pass in the quotes, it won't work. All right, now we can open the connection. And we need a SQL data reader. If you've ever done any kind of SQL querying inside of your C# before, then you know a SQL data reader is what you're going to get back from a SQL select command. This is like video game EDM. It's kind of catchy. So the execute reader is what's going to execute our command. Reader is what's going to store our data that we're going to get back from SQL Server. And then basically I just want to loop through that and create and populate the properties of my student objects so that I can put them in the list. So, no, wrong, read. So I'm going to set up a student object. No constructor deliberately so that we can do it this way. So first name is going to be the reader, and in square brackets, the field name, which is first name, in quotes, dot toString. And they're all going to look pretty much identical. In fact, I could probably copy and paste them. We already have their email, but I'm going to get it anyway. Column name here is user email. That's what we used up in the select statement. That's important. There's a fire truck outside, and my dog is like, ears up. He's probably gonna sing. Maybe you'll hear him sing. He's singing. That's adorable. Sing to the fire truck. Sing. Now this perception field is a float. It's not. It's not a float value when we do it this way. I think I actually have to change this to a double. And then I have to change it in the class, because you can't do that with a float value. It shouldn't matter. Just want to make sure I preserve my data points at this point. Okay, so for each record we get, we're going to loop through, create a student object, populate the properties, and then when we're all done, we'll close the connection, and we could create another. Now we could wrap this in a try catch, which is what I did last time. And then, of course, we have to return our list because this returns a list of type student. And build. Why does it not like that? Oh, it's capital L. Man, this no intelligence thing is killing me. Okay, so this builds, and this looks fine. Shouldn't have to do anything too funky here. All right, so get rid of this, get rid of this, pull this over here so that I can put my database password in it. And you don't see it, right? That's the important part. And then I can deploy it to AWS. So I give it a name just like I did last time. And I give it a role just like I did last time. And then you upload it. I don't have my phone plugged in. Let's do that while that's doing that. All right, so once you have it uploaded, you get the same little test invoke screen that you got last time. We don't have to configure any event sources or anything for this one because it's just going to accept a string and then return some data based on what it got. We should be able to, let me try this. I don't know if I remember how this works. Now, oh wait, go back to what I had in there. I want it in this key value pair. Yeah, no, I don't know how to do this. Oh, there you go. Got some kind of error, that's cool. It doesn't like what I sent it. That's fine. I don't even ever use this thing. I would so much rather just write my code and then be able to see if I'm doing this right. All right, so I'm going to set up some things over here with my view to be able to test what it is that I'm doing. So the first thing I'm going to set up is another button. We'll just create another button right here. I really don't want to do it that way. Give it a name, give it an ID. All right, so when we click this Get Registration button, it's going to call our function and retrieve our data and return a list. So what we want to do is then gather that list and display it. So how do I want to do this? Could just do it right here in the main view. Yeah, that seems fine. I'm trying to think if there's a reason why I wouldn't do it that way. I mean, you could open up another activity and do it that way. That would work just as well. But I think I might just use a text view so that we can see that it's working. Text views are pretty good. Just dock it to the rest of the window. Don't want it to say anything by default. And then you can just give it a name for whatever you want to name it. Just gonna name it text here. Seems legit, right? Oh, my earbud is making my ear itch. Okay, so we're going to come up here just like we did last time. Anytime you have a control that you've put on the form, you have to do this find view by ID and pull it out of the resources. We'll see if I have to build before I can find it. Yeah. Such a pain. There it is. I should just always build. After you mess with the layout, just build. I don't even know why I try anymore. All right, so it's setting up a click event. I'll just call it get button. I like to stick with my naming conventions. All right, so here is our click event handler that we've set up for our get button. So when we click the button, the first thing we want to do is get the email address that we want to retrieve a record for. And I'm just going to hard code this in, and we can change it here in the code so that we can actually see that it works. But you could set this up to use an edit text or something like that, so that you can just like type in the email that you want to get the information for. All right, do we have the right packages? What packages? We've got Kinesis. I don't know that we need anything else. Maybe? We already have the Amazon Lambda stuff. So I'm not sure that we need anything else. Let's just go and see. Yeah, so it sees my Amazon. So we got to set, let's work out some steps, right? So we're setting up a call directly to Lambda. So we're just completely going to hop over that whole Kinesis thing that we talked about and just go straight to the function and call it. So we have to point the Lambda call at the right location endpoint. And so that's region endpoint. And so that's that US East 1. Then we have our credentials. So just like we did down here, wherever that is, where we had our secret key, our access key, it looks like the same thing. And so you'd put your access key and your secret key, and I'll put those back in there before I run this so that we can actually make sure it works. Let me grab my text view. So that I can access that. And just for good measure, I'm going to put this in a try catch, because if it blows up, I want to know why. I just usually put this stuff on the console so I can read it while I'm debugging. You, of course, can decide what you want to do with your errors. All right, so this is a pretty chunky piece of code. What you want to do is similar to what we did with the Kinesis. We're going to set up a Kinesis client. We're going to set up a Lambda client. And that takes in the credential and the endpoint information and stuff. We have to create a payload. And that payload, in this case, is going to be that email address. But the payload is whatever we're actively sending to Lambda. So in our previous example where I put the data in Kinesis, like that put request package was the payload for Lambda. But when you're accessing Lambda directly, you have to create this invoke request, which has a payload in it. So I'm going to show you how you put that together. And then also similarly to what we did down here, we're making this an asynchronous request so that we're not hanging on the UI thread. We're going to do the same thing here and set up an asynchronous request. In fact, I could probably go ahead and, well, let me just get there when I get there. So setting up that Lambda client, I'm doing this without putting the using statements in. Why can't I type? It's not saying my Amazon Lambda. Oh, I bet I didn't put the Lambda package in yesterday, Tuesday. Let's go look. I bet I didn't, because I just did the Kinesis package. Is it Lambda Core? I think it's Amazon Lambda Core, this one. That'll help. For real. There we go. Core. Nope, it's just on Lambda. No, you're not seeing what I want. I must still be missing a package. What am I missing? Oh, I don't have the SDK Lambda. AWS SDK Lambda is what I need. I really wish we could get with some kind of naming convention for these packages, because it gets really difficult to try to remember which ones that I need. And I'm doing this without a using statement so that I can remember how this request goes. There we go. Amazon Lambda client. And so this takes in our credentials and the region information from these two things that we set up here. All right, so setting up this payload, and here's the weird thing about the payload. It has to be, payload information has to be encapsulated into double quotes. So you end up having to do like strange escape sequences. I don't make the rules. So this is a Lambda model invoke request. All right, so in this invoke request, oops, I don't want, actually I want this. So we have a function name we have to define. Function name is the name of the Lambda function that we're going to try to hit. And so you can, remember, you can come look at these in your Explorer, and it's get registration. And an invocation type that we also have to define. There's a couple of different ones. In this case, because we're actually wanting data back, this is a request response. You can go look at the documentation. There's a couple of different types that tells you what they are. And then the payload. So the payload itself is the email address, this here. And it has to be encapsulated in double quotes. And so in C#, right, we have to put the string in quotes. So then we have to escape / quote, quote, and then we can concatenate in the data we want, and then concatenate quote, escape, quote. So if it helps to look at it like this, I like to put the spaces in there. Oops. Then it's giving me an error. What did I do wrong? Quote, escape, quote, quote, concatenate, email, concatenate, escape, quote, quote, quote. I don't know why it's mad. Unrecognized escape sequence. Probably because I put those spaces in there and it hates that. Yeah, it does hate that. There we go. So I'll make the rules. Your payload has to be encapsulated in double quotes. So that's the stuff that you set up on your invoke request for your payload. And now we want to make sure and set this up. So I'm gonna put this task on another thread so the UI doesn't lock up, because it will. And in the case of the previous example where I said, don't put this on the UI thread because, like, what if it hangs? Kinesis is stupid fast. But for whatever reason, like, this Lambda request will take, I mean, not a minute, but a while, however long you want to assume that means. All right, so task. The task is this is the task. No, this is the task. Task type is an invoke request. And so to actually run all of this, so contacting the client at the endpoint, running the get registration function with the payload, it's client.invoke async with your invocation request that we put together up there. Don't yell at me. I'm fairly certain that's right. Invoke request is the type. Task. Why? Yell about what? That doesn't seem right. Cannot convert from to system threading tasks. Invoke request. They're the same data type. Why do you think they're not the same data type? This and this are the same data type. Why would you think that they're not? Have I done something weird? Sometimes it's just Visual Studio, like it's just like legit Visual Studio. and it's not that you've done anything wrong. Super weird. Let's try copy, paste, build. Oh, you're still trying to do something. God help you, Visual Studio. Waiting. Hey, look at that. Yep, that seems fine. I'm gonna let it finish. This is the hardest part. Like, you know, I talked a little bit about how last stream about how like students get really discouraged, and a lot of times it's because they don't know how to debug their own code and stuff. This right here does not help, because the fact that this statement is perfectly correct but was giving me an error, I know and have the self-confidence to be like, no, that's wrong. But if you don't have that level of experience, then you start chasing bugs that are actually ghosts. They do not exist. And so it's kind of a bizarre environment where you have to believe in yourself. Sound like a Disney movie. All right, no, this builds. There's nothing wrong with this statement. All right, so setting this up, I've got this asynchronous task ready. So I'm going to set up my await. So response task. You're not gonna do anything with me, are you, today? I probably just need to restart. So much hate. Why do you not see what I'm doing? I'm super confused. Let me just finish this statement, and then I want to figure out. Part of the reason it doesn't like the await here is that I haven't added the async here. And I'm messing with my parentheses. Okay, no, that's good. I was just messing with the syntax. So our response task, this is what the client is going to return. Continue with, you can go look up the documentation for continue with, but basically it's just going to pull this over to another thread. And so everything we want to do in here is where all of that kind of magic happens. So I'm going to create a string so that we can kind of see what's going on with our status text. And if you wanted to set up like an informational text message kind of thing, friendly error message. Now, I'll tell you the biggest error, the first time I did this, I kept getting the same error over and over again. Internal error, unhandled branch point. And an unhandled branch point in the Lambda client basically means like it's called the function, but it doesn't, it got a response that it doesn't understand, or it got some kind of status request message back from the server that it didn't understand. And I cannot, for the life of me, figure out why I could not always reproduce the same unhandled branch point error over and over again. It seems a little unstable. So the last time I did this, I basically had to come up with a little bit of bulletproofing to make sure that if it comes back with, there's a couple of different status messages that it'll come back with. It'll come back with canceled. So like the user canceled the request while it was in process, or for some reason the server cancels your request while it's in process. Faulted, which means it actually got an exception, or it'll finish. And finish is actually like a success, like I finished my stuff and I'm done. So unhandled branch point means that it somehow got a response that isn't one of those three. So when setting up this bulletproofing, like it should always, we should be able to resolve, and you like don't get that. Basically, we want to try not to get that. So if the response is canceled, there's also completed, but a finished is the same thing as far as I can tell. So if it's canceled, like you can set your status text to canceled, right? Oops, can't spell. Right? If it's canceled, like that's just it. And else if for the response is faulted. So this is that it got some kind of exception or something at runtime in the function, and so it's broken. And so you could set your status text to faulted. I'm not actually doing anything with these currently, but if you actually wanted the error message of the fault, you can get the response exception message, and that should be whatever the exception message was in the actual function, which is helpful. A lot of times you get more than one of them. That's important to think about, so you might actually want to do a for each. Good music today. So that you get all of those inner exceptions. Inner exceptions. New lines. Just to make that readable. I could spit all that out somewhere. Else if the response is completed, right? So it's finished. Good stuff happened. That's what we want. We want good stuff happened. So you get your result back as a payload back from Lambda, and then you'll want to do something with it. In our case, we're going to want to put it in our text box. Do I have system.io? Yeah, system.io. Stream reader is the way this comes in. It's a stream reader object, and so it's your response result payload is where that response actually lives. So result response payload, you can see comes in as a memory stream object from that invoke response payload. We can read it with a stream reader, and then I'm going to put it into this little response reader variable. And then you could also take your informational text and do read to end. So you actually have like a complete record of whatever you got back as your payload. That's helpful. Okay, so if you're not familiar with multi-threading, we were on the UI thread, and we said, hey, I want you to create another thread and do all this processing over here, and now I have this payload object over here, and I want to put it on the UI. Well, the UI thread can't see this other thread that I made, or at least there's no cross-thread talking, especially not in Android, or in iOS for that matter. When you're doing this mobile application stuff, like you have to be really careful with your threading because they don't talk to each other. So what you have to do is you have to explicitly tell the OS that you want to take this thread and run it on the UI thread so that they're talking to each other. If you don't do that, then you have to like set up another task to perform the UI changes on the other thread. Like it's a huge pain in the butt, so like don't do it. Basically, we get the command run on UI thread that we can set up to delegate this out. This syntax is so funky. I'll pull this back up here. All right, so run on UI thread is the way that we handle that. That's how we say, like, take this stuff over here that I've been working on and pull it over to the UI thread so that I can use it, because otherwise you don't have access to it. So we have the response. It's a serialized object, and that's part of the reason why I used var here, because when you get this off the stream reader, like, it's just a serialized object. So you would want to use your JSON conversion package to deserialize that object into the proper list type. So we're going to create a list. I probably don't have, I'll just go ahead and add this in up here. So JSON convert, deserialize object into a list of type student, bracket, bracket. What am I deserializing? What I put in the informational text string. So now you should have this nice list of students as their proper object type, and you could then loop through student list. And what I call my text, display text. That was weird. All right, so that seems like a lot, especially considering our Kinesis function like seemed to take it really well to just like make the put request and then the function just took care of things. But just to walk through this again, we set up a region endpoint, set up your credentials, create a client which takes the credentials in the region. You're going to set up an invoke request which tells the Lambda client the name of the function on Lambda that you want to run, the type of running you want to do, and the type of data that you need to send over as a payload, encapsulated in double quotes. We set up a thread so that when we invoke this request, we don't do it on the UI thread so that the UI doesn't lock up and like turn white and the user could still go back or do something else or click that button a million times. Oh my God, please don't. So using this continue with, so on the current thread that we've just created, we are basically checking to see what is the status, because this client invoke async, this right here is what kicks all of this off. And so response is what we get back. We're checking to see the flag status of that response, and then we're responding appropriately, and then using run on UI thread to pull it back over to the UI thread so that we can deserialize the object and display it properly, and we actually have access to it. So let's go check it out. I'm gonna pull this over here so I can put my secret key and junk back in there. Don't be looking at my secret keys, man. All right, give it one more build just for luck. Oof. I don't believe in that kind of luck. All right, it's building. Build succeeded. So now, turn on my phone, should be able to deploy this, and we'll see if I have any errors. Remember, this is basically the only way you can find out. This is what the music's for. So you don't get bored while you're waiting for things to build. Okay, so now we can see we have two buttons here. When I click get registration, a lot of scrolling happens, and then we can wait and see if it just straight up blows up or not. Yep, oh, I got an exception. It wasn't able to deserialize the object. Timeout exceeded. That is a great error. I like timeout exceeded. So, why? Actually, let me deploy that again. I want to see the output log. Okay. So when I click the button, you wait for all of this stuff to happen. Okay. So here in the informational text, this is where we're getting like the block of everything from the function. This is actually what it says. Index out of range exception. So I have to go over to the function. Let me pull the function back up. Do I still have it open? See if I can figure out where would it get an index out of range exception? It's a good question. So we may have to go look at the AWS logs. So this is what our Lambda function log looks like. See if there's a clue in here. Not really seeing anything. There's that beginning to process records. And then we get for phone, maybe? Doing a two-string. Phone is a string in the class. Oh, it's a wrong column name. It's phone no in the database, and I used phone in the code. So I'll change that real quick. I'll show you. See here? I had it just phone. So, easy fix. That stuff happens. Here's that bug I was talking about. See where I was like, you can't click upload? You have to like switch this to a different role, like I just switch it back and now I can upload. It's like some kind of strange UI bug. I don't know what that's about. So we'll republish. Okay. So that's all done. Put this away. I'm gonna move this window over just a little bit. There we go. Okay. So we shouldn't need to change anything in this code. So I can just click the button again and see if it'll go. Or no, it's faulted. I have to restart. That happens. It's a lot of tedious downtime. Your projects start getting large and they start taking whole minutes to build. And then it takes like minutes to deploy and you're just like, ugh. Okay. So lots of scroll. We'll wait and see if we get another exception. Or if it went through that time. Now I'm not seeing any data on the phone, which is not a good sign. We're also not getting an exception, which is a good sign. It's a good sign. So let's go back over here to the logs. We should be able to see sometimes I have to dump the log. I cannot read all of this junk. It looks like it's actually working correctly, but we're not getting any data. Where's my window? Hey, thanks. Lyndon Watkins. I appreciate that. All right. Not seeing any, we're getting both our begin to process records and the select complete, which makes me think the Lambda function itself is performing correctly. So what we can do over here is you can actually debug on the phone. So let's just see, let's set a breakpoint and then run and see what we get. All right, it's going. I knew Tuesday when I did that and I wrote that whole function and I wrote that whole section and like didn't have a single exception, I was like, that was bizarre. All right, so you can see it's running and then down here it says the thread is exited, but we've never actually hit this breakpoint. So the problem is somewhere up here. Like we're not actually getting, no, that's gonna give me this whole thing, I don't want that. Are we never actually getting into, let's just stop here. Debugging, so important. All right, so I click the button. All right, so we can see here's where we stop. All right. What are you doing? Making the request. And then what? It's just never coming back? What happens? All right, let me just dig into this. See if I can figure out. Maybe I've done something weird. I know we're calling the right function. We're doing all this. This is all fine. Okay. That's right. Looking at my documentation. I just want to see if I left something out. It doesn't even imply that we're getting into this section. But I think all of this is probably fine. We're not actually getting an exception on the thread. Ugh, my earbuds are making my ears itch. Interesting. What could be causing that? I have a feeling it has to do with the fact that we're creating an asynchronous button click event. So let me actually try something else. Let's just pull out, because that's not normally the way I do it. Just make a new method. Okay, let's take that off. So I think that was maybe the problem. I don't normally create asynchronous button call requests. And so I did that weird there. So all I did was break it out into a separate method. And then the button click event just calls that method. So nothing fancy. But maybe that'll fix the problem, because as far as I can tell, we're not even getting into the thread section that we need to get into. It's just failing. It's just weird, because you can see up on Lambda where it's actually calling the function. All right, so click the button. Stuff happens. It's a little black boxy here with the debugging. The thread exited again. It's definitely getting the records. So it's super weird that it doesn't seem to want to put them where they belong. You gotta have patience to program. That's really all it is. Oh, hey, look. Okay, so we are getting this far. I want the status of informational text. What's in here? Give it function evaluation timeout. I don't believe you. Oh, it's just coming back blank. So it's working, but it's just coming back blank. So for whatever reason, it's not matching our email addresses the way that I think it's going to. That's weird. But it is actually finishing. I can see that. But the informational text is empty. So, well, that at least tells me that the function is working correctly. So it's probably an issue with the payload. I can just try putting what I want in here directly and see if I can at least get that far. Oh, I bet it's is it the @ sign in the email? Now I actually want to know. What were we using? Oh, that's right. I was thinking I typoed it, right? It's terrible. Okay, what have I done wrong? If I actually screwed up the function, you would think I wouldn't be getting the right thing back, because select star from DBO registration where user email, right, and it's user email, equals the email of the payload we're passing over. Right, and here's where I did that. Here's the function. I could, let's try this. I could put a log line in here to actually print the first name of the student that I get, so that I can see am I actually getting a record or is something broken in the function. This is where the whole not being able to run these locally really bites you. All right, so I'm redeploying this to Lambda. Well, I look at this to try to see if I've done something odd. I don't think so. Okay, let's run. And if I'm ever doing something and you would like more information, or what I'm saying isn't making sense, just please put something in the chat. I would so much rather like help you understand than you like just feel like, what the hell is she doing? Why would you do that? I asked myself those questions. So, all right, so I click the button. We do the thing. We get back nothing, but that does mean I can now come over here and look at the log file. Now I'm actually getting, you can see it, there it is. I'm actually getting it. Yeah. Yep. All right, so it's not the function. The function should be returning the proper list. So the question now has to become, what's happening to my list? Oh no, it is the function. I was just sitting here looking at it and you can see, oh my gosh. What did I not do? I went through and I created this beautiful student object and I returned this list and I never put the student in the dang list. Can you even believe it? Oh my gosh. Well, that'll fix it about why it's returning nothing. For the love of goodness. Yep, that'll fix it right now. It's fine if you're laughing. I appreciate it. If you can't laugh at yourself, man, you're having a bad day. That stuff happens. You forget a step and then suddenly you're debugging for 20 minutes trying to figure out what's wrong when in fact just skipped a step. Well, that should certainly solve things. Let's pull this breakpoint out of here. Now let's see what we get. Apparently I need to switch to coffee, but it's already like 4 o'clock for me. If I drink coffee in the afternoon, I typically don't go to bed till like 2. Terrible. All right, so click Get Registration. We can see all the stuff happening in the console. We should actually be getting a list of things back now. All right, I can see them. I don't know if you can see them. Now, we're not getting them back in a very friendly format because I haven't really done anything, but you can see them. There are 2 of them because there are 2 people in the database that have that information. So we're not getting them back in a very friendly format because the student object in this case doesn't have a toString method. So here it is down here. If we actually create a toString method for the class, then we can actually get a prettier output. So we could return what we wanted to return. Let's say we return first name, space, I gotta concatenate this together. Last name. Goes to school. All right, so basically, if you're not familiar with this concept in C#, when you are accessing an object directly that doesn't have a toString, then it's always just going to give you namespace.classname as the pretty print version of the object. But if you override that toString and return what you want as your pretty print, then you get what you want. So let's try again. And it's slow, right? So like, especially if you compare it to what I was doing with the Kinesis function, man, that Kinesis function is fast. But if you watch, you can actually watch, we can count. I push the button. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. 4 seconds. 4 seconds in mobile is an eternity. But now we can see that Jon Snow goes to a school called The Wall. I hope everyone can see that because it's funny, dang it. So calling Lambda functions in C# with Xamarin, of course, we can see is possible. It requires some code gymnastics a little bit to make it work correctly, but it's sometimes something we want to do. We just need to be prepared for the fact that it could take, and this is just 2 records. So if you're actually retrieving data of any significant size, I mean, you could take up to, I don't know, like 10 seconds to make it work, which may not be an acceptable thing to do. So I don't know if Amazon has any plans to make this a little more robust so that it doesn't take so long, or if they're just trying to force you into using companion technologies like Kinesis, where you'd have to pull those packages down and read them directly from the Kinesis stream instead of going straight to Lambda. I'm pretty sure that there has to be something that they're doing differently for the Amazon Echo environment, because that's all of those Lambda functions up there are what drives the Echo skills. And they're not that slow. So what is it that Amazon is doing that hobbles the rest of us? I don't know, it's a strange idea. But that is basically what I wanted to demonstrate today. The purpose of today's stream was to talk about how to access these Amazon Lambda functions directly and consume them in a Xamarin application, so that if you wanted to do that, you could do that. And again, looking at how you write those Lambda functions, because it can be a little tricky when you're thinking about this like encapsulated environment of this one function that basically does like one thing. So I hope you've enjoyed. I think that's going to be my stream for the day. Feels like a good stopping place. Please try to stay cool outside. If you're outside, stay inside. Like, don't go outside. There's no reason to go out there. And I hope you've enjoyed. And if you have questions, feel free to hit me up with those. If you have suggestions for things that you'd like me to talk about or examples that you'd like me to show, I like those kinds of recommendations so that I can actually try to like help you with something that you might need help with. I like finding obscure problems and things like this that aren't well documented and then basically video documenting them. So thanks for hanging with me this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will catch you later.